Hello, Fantastic Beasts fans. The theory I have for you today is a bit gruesome, so I'm not quite sure what it says about me that I'm excited to bring it to you. But here we go. I'm Susan Chappell with Fantastic Secrets Behind Fantastic Beasts to bring you the clues.
Join me and other Fantastic Beasts fans here on the Beast Chaser Forum as we uncover the secrets, discover what's coming first, and play along with Rowling's newest game. And make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell notification so you'll be notified when videos post and won't miss out on the next clues. I want to read to you a passage from Isis Unveiled, a book on esoteric philosophy written in the 19th century by Helena Blavatsky, who's considered the inspiration for the name Cassandra Vablatsky, Professor Trelawney's Seer ancestor. The story's a bit gory, so if you're squeamish, you might want to click off now. It retells a passage from Jean Bodin, a French philosopher and demonologist whose writing was influenced by the conflicts of both the Inquisition and Protestant Reformation. He's recounting an event concerning Catherine de' Medici, who was Queen of France in the mid-16th century, and her son, King Charles, who became king after the passing of his father and elder brother. Blavatsky first gives an intro. Catherine, the pious Christian, who has so well deserved in the eyes of the Church of Christ for the atrocious and never to be forgotten massacre of St. Bartholomew, the Queen Catherine, kept in her service an apostate Jacobin priest, well versed in the black art so fully patronized by the Medici family. He had won the gratitude and protection of his pious mistress by his unparalleled skill in killing people at a distance, by torturing with various incantations their wax simulacra. The process has been described over and over again, and we scarcely need to repeat it. Then she tells a story. Charles was lying sick of an incurable disease. The Queen Mother had everything to lose in case of his death, resorted to necromancy, consulted the oracle of the bleeding head. This infernal operation required the decapitation of a child who must be possessed of great beauty and purity. He had been prepared in secret for his first communion by the chaplain of the palace, who was apprised of the plot, and at midnight of the appointed day, in the chamber of the sick man, and in presence only of Catherine and a few of her confederates, the devil's mass was celebrated. Let us give the rest of the story as we find it in one of Levi's works. At this mass, celebrated before the image of the demon, having under his feet a reversed cross, the sorcerer consecrated 2 wafers, one black and one white. The white was given to the child, whom they brought clothed as for baptism, and who was murdered upon the very steps of the altar immediately after his communion. His head, separated from the trunk by a single blow, was placed all palpitating upon the great black wafer which covered the bottom of the paten, and then placed upon a table where some mysterious lamps were burning. The exorcism then began, and the demon was charged to pronounce an oracle and reply by the mouth of this head to a secret question that the king dared not speak aloud, and that had been confided to no one. Then a feeble voice, a strange voice, which had nothing of human character about it, made itself audible in this poor little martyr's head. So basically, we've got a child sacrificed to save the life of an ailing king, done as part of a black mass. This mass, said before the image of Satan, was believed to summon the devil to answer a question, predict the future, or do one's bidding, much like we analyzed in the video of the Macusa pentagram scene as symbolic for summoning and controlling demons. The child's severed head was placed on a paten, which is the plate that holds the consecrated wafer or bread in communion, thought to symbolize Christ's body. Now, for a bit of background as to why this sacrifice was necessary. King Charles was believed by his mother to be going mad because of the immense guilt he was feeling for ordering the murder of thousands of Huguenots in the St. Bartholomew's massacre, something his mother is believed to have pushed him to do, and he blamed her for. And the words that the demon spoke through the dead boy's mouth? Vim patior, I suffer violence. In Catholic Mass, the table where the paten and chalice are kept prior to serving from the altar is called the Credence Table. and the long-term storage away from the altar is called the credence cupboard. Maybe like this. Could Credence be the child of the sacrifice? After all, he was virtually killed off last film. Maybe, but I'm wondering if Credence's role in this scenario is something different. Instead, Credence is the answer to the question asked of the skull. He's the vim patior, I suffer violence. In analyzing the skull image in my initial reaction to the Comic-Con trailer, posted that same day, I thought the bottles and bowls and scissors surrounding the skull might point to a medical need of Grindelwald's, and I thought the pipe hooked up to the skull might indicate that he was smoking something from it, like in a hookah, which I still believe. But now I'm wondering if those bowls and bottle might indicate the end of a ritual, perhaps one that helps Grindelwald see his visions, as suggested by Jean Bodin and Suvi Holm. Although Blavatsky called the ritual the Oracle of the Bleeding Head, it falls in line with a type of necromancy known throughout history among many cultures. After a skull was defleshed through age or cleansed of organic matter, it was sometimes filled with various herbs or other magical ingredients and decorated to represent the person who died. These oracular skulls were used to summon the spirit of the deceased who used to call that skull home. The request could be quite peaceful, such as predictions of future events. The oracular skull would then speak with the deceased voice and offer wisdom from the spiritual realm. In my earlier video, I speculated that Grindelwald might be planting a tampered memory to persuade his supporters of his cause. But what if he's been using the skull to assist with his visions? Could the skull perhaps speak before the crowd in the voice of a famed witch or wizard, replaying the vision Grindelwald has seen? Perhaps as part of a ritual. I've said since the first trailer that this setting speaks to me of an ancient ritual, especially with Grindelwald firmly centered on that dais. And if the ritual involves a speaking skull, could it be calling forth other spirits in the room? The cast have all talked about how much darker this movie is than the first. Even if Rowling would not venture so far as a child sacrifice, there's a lot she could do in dark magic with an oracular skull to convey Grindelwald's vision to his followers. And with the Muggle Holocaust looming, this series is going to get very dark. I can well see why Rowling would bring into her story, even if only in subtext, hints of the violence following the Inquisition and the Protestant Reformation, especially focused on the massacre of the Huguenots. The fear, hatred, and mass killings of the St. Bartholomew Day massacre is explained by Bruce Lincoln, a history of religions professor at the University of Chicago, as the result of radical otherness in perception of customs and beliefs that separated the Catholics from the Huguenots. We've mentioned a couple of times how Rowling has addressed the series as focused on how we make beasts of others. But going back to Blavatsky's introduction to the story, who was the supposed priest who performed the ceremony? Cosimo Ruggieri, an Italian living in Paris, like Catherine, was an alchemist and astrologer who basically served as Catherine's spiritual advisor and sometimes hitman. He also had a reputation as a seer. And he combined his skills as a seer with magic. Above all, Catherine, as Queen Mother, desired to protect her dynasty. In the middle of the night, in a dark room of the Château de Chaumont, Ruggieri had Catherine gaze into an enchanted mirror to view the fates of her 4 sons. According to legend, the mirror correctly predicted 3 of her sons would be kings, but of short reign and no heirs, which all came to pass, perhaps not as she desired. Ruggieri also predicted the manner of the Queen Mother's death. As Blavatsky mentioned in the introduction to the Oracle of the Bleeding Head, Ruggieri was also greatly feared for his ability to kill from afar by torturing via a wax figurine. At the time, this was called the death spell and was a popular tool for causing harm to one's enemies. A wax figure was shaped like the intended target, and the person holding it would stab the wax figure with pins or knives. The human victim would then suffer pain or trauma in those regions. In fact, Ruggieri was convicted of using one such wax image against the king himself and sentenced to death, but due to his connections with Catherine, was eventually freed. I even read of one instance where a skull, decorated to represent the living target, was used and stabbed with a knife. But wait, there's more. Remember at the beginning of FB1 how we saw Grindelwald in front of what was identified as a chateau? Ruggieri stayed frequently with Catherine in her Château de Chaumont. Could this be the same chateau Grindelwald stayed in? Was he perhaps seeking something that remained of Ruggieri, writing perhaps, or a relic? In a room that bears Ruggieri's name, above the fireplace, is this symbol, attributed to him. The three circles, known as the Borromean rings, could symbolize a lot of things, from the Christian Trinity to mind, body, and spirit, to heaven, earth, and underworld. Whatever they represent, the rings always show strength and unity. Together, the circles are unbreakable, but if you remove one, the other two fall apart. By interlocking them with the triangle, used in alchemy for various forms to represent air, earth, fire, and water, I think Ruggieri was exploring his vision of alchemy, the interconnection between physical life and the spiritual realm, and the strength in uniting them through the mystic arts. Perhaps Ruggieri's symbol is even an early version of the philosopher's stone. And perhaps Grindelwald considers Ruggieri and his symbol an inspiration for his own, the union of all magicals for the greater good. As mentioned in my prior theory, Ross Nicholson proposed that the writing on the skull was German for the greater good. However, in the comments, Thea Pfeiffer presents an alternative. Could the German phrase be the great work instead, referring to the magnum opus, the creation of the philosopher's stone? Either one could work for this particular skull, if it does indeed belong to Ruggieri, or a character based on him. As he's an alchemist, Ruggieri sought to create the great work, but if the stories of his dark magic are to be believed, he could have justified it as for the greater good. If any of these links to Ruggieri are valid, in those short scenes of Grindelwald's followers moving caskets and lurking about cemeteries, are they looking for Ruggieri, whose grave, if it exists, is unknown? I want to consider too the role Ruggieri might play to Flamel. While historically speaking, Flamel lived a couple of centuries before Ruggieri, in Rowling's world, Flamel would have still been alive and in the same city, Paris. Perhaps Flamel was even Ruggieri's mentor, until he went dark. Could Ruggieri be the dark magic alchemist to Flamel's good? If that is his skull, we won't see him on screen, but could hear about his legend, much like with Salazar Slytherin. It would make sense for this story to feature a dark alchemist instead of a dark school founder. Alas, Ruggieri met a terrible end. Because he refused to take the communion of last rite from Capuchin monks, and his reputation had caught up with him, he was considered a sorcerer. He was not granted a Christian burial, and his body was dragged through the streets. Because of growing resentment regarding certain of Ruggieri's connections, his death ushered in a wave of hostility against French Jews, and Parliament reenacted an old edict to deport them. Ruggieri died in 1615. While it's really hard to read that date on the skull, and I've seen other interpretations of 1895, my first thought when I enlarged this image before ever hearing of Ruggieri was that it was 1615 or 1613. However, although I've referred to Ruggieri as a possible character throughout, I doubt we'd ever hear his name on screen. Rowling will most likely, as usual, give her inspirations her own twist. I believe we'd only find Ruggieri in subtext. As I've covered a lot of ground, here's a short summary. I believe it's very possible that Rowling has created an historical wizard character based on Ruggieri. Like Slytherin to Voldemort, this person may be an inspiration to Grindelwald, but probably not an ancestor. In this short scene we see of Grindelwald, probably with the skull, he may be drawing on the power of this ancient seer for his own visions. Whether that ritual goes so far as a human sacrifice, will depend on how dark Rowling wants to go, but we'll see something enacted in a joint ritual in the amphitheater, something that unites Grindelwald and his followers in a shared vision. Also, one thing I'd like to note before we end. I hope you've noticed that I try very carefully to credit people who originate any theories I present that are not my own. However, in fandom, when we're following the same thread of clues, we often come to the same conclusion. That happens. And sometimes, because of my poor memory, I might forget to credit someone. If you believe that to be the case, please let me know. But in return, I hope if you're spreading one of my theories around on social media, which I hope you do, that you'll credit me in return. Thank you. So what do you think? Is Fantastic Beasts to have its own version of Salazar Slytherin? If so, the material I'm tossing out on Ruggieri is just the tip. Let's explore this thread together. Please share your thoughts in the comments. And please check out my new fan shop on Amazon for books and Funko Pops and wands and all things Fantastic Beasts. Until next time.